Good afternoon, everyone. This was Spencer Dam. This is what it looks like after the floods in Nebraska. Images captured while the water was rushing over, destroying the dam. So much of the central U.S. crop growing area is completely underwater, massive flooding. This was all brought about by the bombogenesis a few days back, and this is what our farmlands look like now. Massive flooding, historic flooding again. Ice flows over rivers across the Midwest. And our infrastructure did not fare well during this storm. All the road closures, interstate closures, bridges washed away. Rescuing cows using backhoes, there's no other alternative. National Weather Service abandons their office due to massive floods. Wastewater treatment plants can't cope. Before and after, above and below of the waters. Again and again, it's just massive fill up as the snowpack and the floods from the bombogenesis combined. What do you think is going to happen to the planting season? This is definitely a grand solar minimum associated storm. And during these uncertain times, I've teamed up with My Patriot Supply long-term food storage. A nice, affordable starter kit, 2-week food supply, 1,500 calories per day, breakfast, lunch, and dinners, plus the 4-gallon storage containers included in that. This is a good first step in getting more self-sufficient. And if you click through the Prepare with Adapt 2030 page in My Patriot Supply, you can get this starter kit for $75. Please remember there's a limit of 2 per household in this special offer. This is a great indicator to allow you to know, as these storms amplify and intensify, how our infrastructure is going to cope moving forward, because this is just the beginning of the amplification moving through 2025. This massive flooding that you're hearing about all across the news media globally is from what was the bombogenesis rolling straight through the center of the U.S. 100-mile-per-hour winds, all types of barometric low records smashed, as well as wind velocity or wind speed temperature records broken. Then if you look straight into the center there and up a little bit, you can see where the storm tapered off through the British Maritimes. But during the most intense part of that storm, reaching those record barometric pressure and snowfall totals, rainfall totals, wind, this is what was left. Anywhere in that purple that you see is massive, massive flooding. Reds are what would be considered news-making massive floods in their own right. The oranges would be regional, reported on flooding. And looking at the National Weather Service, again, we see the same word, historic. So how did these gauges come about anyway? So I broke it down here. Major flooding, you can see where the spots are. They seem to be clustered, especially around Nebraska area and also when we get over into Iowa. Anywhere there was an orange dot, if this other massive super flood, historic, wasn't going on, each one of those orange dots would in their own right be making the news due to how large of an area it encompassed and affected. Minor flooding, this will be inconvenient for a couple of days. But when I talk about Nebraska, overtopping bridges is where they're at. So many rivers reaching the all-time ever recorded heights. Breaking levees, as you can see right in the center here, levee breach. This is our farmland. Planting will be delayed further again due to these all-time historic, well, at least in the last 150 years, floods. Grand solar minimum is going to take us into 400-year events every single storm as we reach that point around 2024. But the waterways are exploding in size. So above is pre-flood, and now is flood. And what I do predict coming in the future, 21, 22, is off to the right and left. You can see some of the other tributaries. I believe those will start to fill as well. And instead of having 2 major arteries that you see swollen there, I believe there'll be 4 or 5 on this exact same map. So the before and after on Landsat, you can see how much water is really filling the deltas now. It's almost like the Okavango Delta being refilled in its seasonal flows. But in the United States, we're not used to this. Hasn't been this extreme in hundreds and hundreds of years. So where our infrastructure currently lies, nature's just going to take care of this for us. As you can see, the roadways before and after, and you think, well, those are just country roads. Maybe they'll get flooded. Helicopter rescues, but look at the severity of the waters coming through the farmlands. Give you a different angle here so you can see how widespread that is. You know how big barns are anyway with massive mechanized machinery? The scope of this is it's unthinkable until you start to put the relative size of these objects. How many barns have you been next to, driven by? You know the size of those things are enormous. Look at the 72-hour precipitation map during this same bombogenesis event. You can see where the orange is, and that's exactly where most of this major flooding that our modern infrastructure is not able to cope with took place. Anywhere in the pinks as well. It's all flowing into the Mississippi off the side tributaries, and it's just flood, flood, flood everywhere you look at the moment. Now the area on the map, Bristow, also had the dam over top, which I'll come to in a second. But you can get an overview of where on our planet and in the United States specifically that the changes are taking place and have taken place since 2014-15, this exact same area. Literally, what you're seeing here is being affected year upon year with record snows, record floods, late season planting, early snows on the crops, delayed planting from last year, record cold temperatures, and it's just going to continue to amplify. So we have here the Nebraska hydrological map. Now the higher elevations, what you see in that solid green, river basins going down and over to the east is where the water is flowing to. Eventually that's going to end up in the Mississippi River. But for now, it's ending up all over our farm country, and not just this one specific area where it's red with the green dots is the all-time record flood. That's how massive this event is, but that's bordering on the other states as well. You don't tell me that Colorado and parts of Kansas and Minnesota aren't affected. That was a massive storm that blew through this bombogenesis. Now, so much flooding's going on, and so many bridges are washed away, so many roads are literally washed out. Everywhere that you see on this map here, Nebraska State Police put this out, is a permanent road closure at the moment, meaning they have to get in there and fix the roads. They're washed out. So if it's this much and the waters are heading downstream, you can imagine other states are being affected as well, and I guess we'll have to follow the water flows at this point. So impacts to transportation, eastern Nebraska, yeah, this is what they're looking at. The stability of all the understruts and pilings, everything is in question at the moment. The floods were so massive and so quick that how long will it take just for this area here to go in and be inspected after the floods recede, fix what was washed out? And it's in the cities, it's in the towns, it's literally everywhere. Historic floods. There's not one area along a waterway that has not been affected by this. Let's take a look at the top left there. Those are farm fields. Again, we get the same repeating image. It's like a copy-paste out of almost every single location that has been photographed where people live or farm country across this event. To the point where National Weather Service office in Valley, Nebraska had to abandon due to, look at the floods. They had to leave. This is the weather station. And then rail lines are affected as well. Rail transportation has ceased through the area. Now, that was the same follow-up with the blizzards closing down so many highways during this event. When the bombogenesis passed, leaving the cold along with the floods. There were an incredible amount of snow records broken during this event as well. Blizzard, they call it a bombogenesis. Anyway, when we have this much flooding, you're going to have to think about human waste and sewage. So 50 wastewater treatment facilities are inundated, meaning that there's contaminated water flowing everywhere. So how prepared are you if these floods were to sweep through your area? How long do you think it's going to be before they have access to clean drinking water again? What about food? What about electricity, gas? All these things have been affected due to these floods. Now here's one of the most heartfelt stories. The cows have been swept away in so many floods. There's cows stranded on islands, and there's literally hundreds of thousands of cows stranded that need to be rescued out there. So farmers are actually going in with these backhoes and gently rescuing these cows and moving them from the mud. They're literally stuck where they can't move. Half a buried cow and it just can't get out of that mud. So this is what's happening. It's an all-on rescue effort to get these cows out of the mud. The Nebraska Farm Bureau, it looks so nice and even and dry until you look at an airplane view. Pivot irrigation, well, how much of that other field area, not as inundated as some of these other spots, but I mean, how long is this going to take to dry out? In reality, where you're going to be able to get in there, till the fields, plant them, and hopefully that something will come up. Because remember, that water is incredibly cold at the moment, reducing the soil temperature even further. And with this much water coming down the rivers, those rivers were ice covered in so many places, and then the water dislodged the ice. Water is way more powerful than the ice, and everything was just ice flows, crushing bridges, smashing houses, and anything in its wake. This is how much ice was being pushed down the rivers, bunching up, rolling over whatever was in its way. Now they're using backhoes to remove the ice. That's how much ice was coming off the rivers, pushing inland. And we saw the Lake Erie ice tsunami as well. And look at these flows going up into somebody's house in a rural plot there. Ice jams, rising rivers, flooding fears. And here's the thing that was most startling. Now, everything that I've showed you before, I'd have been like, wow, that was a really intense storm. I never would have put it to a grand solar minimum effect until I saw this here. Now, take a look at the size for scale. This is a hydroelectric dam here, Spencer Dam, right near Bristow, which I showed you on the map earlier, that red dot. Now, this is not the biggest dam in the world by any means, but still it's rather large. It's a dam to hold back all that water, all that pressure. Another good glimpse at it here. And this is what it was holding back, an entire river. This thing had been there untouched, unscathed since the 1940s. Spillway, no problem, but you can see down to the south part there when it would come off the dam, this area was completely washed away. This is what remained of the dam after the floodwaters came through. It did not overtop. It literally swept it away. And I thought, wow, how much water would have to come down to do that, to scour a mile the other direction and leave this thing in shatters. Well, about this much, because I found a live video during the flood event. Look how much water. That is literally astounding what these storms are intensifying into. And you have to realize that what you're seeing here is literally a quarter of as intense as these storms are going to be by 2023 and 2024. If it's coming to this, our farm lands and our crop yields globally are definitely going to have a very big impact into them. How much we can get to feed the planet. And looking downstream, as the same flooding event was going on, that water stretched over to the next hill you can see far over in the distance. How many miles is that away? This comes off the Kearney Hub. Rancher down there describing a harrowing evacuation near that collapsed dam. He says, I've never seen anything like this before. Those previous images that I show you, that spillway there is like usually, I've seen it coming within a foot of that or so, but never anything like this. Aerial view here. Now, even so, with the scale, you can see the size of the pickup trucks in the foreground. And remember, looking more further away, that scale is a little confusing because that's a 2-lane road on top of that dam there. This was not just a minor flood. And then further downstream, after that dam broke, the wall of water went through and ripped apart all the bridges. And to bring you back to the 72-hour precipitation map, the orange centered over Nebraska, but if you go southeast, you'll see the next heaviest band down there near Memphis. So I thought, what's going on in Tennessee? Did they receive extra heavy rainfall? Of course they did. Roads damaged, roads washed out, floods, and they already had a lot of floods the prior week. So this was just adding to what their landscape looks like in terms of agricultural production. And the amplification does seem to be right on track with this Valentina Zarkova magnetic model here, double dynamo in the sun. The wider those waves are, those are magnetic waves on the sun, the wider those are, the more they're canceling each other out, meaning the wider that wave is, the more intense our weather is on this planet. We've just moved into the green, into the bottom and beginning of solar cycle 25. Notice the yellow? That's where we were just even last year. The green at the top, 2021 and 2022. This is how much more amplification we have to go in just the first of 2 waves. You should understand what the grand solar minimum is. And you can check out more analysis and commentary 30 minutes at a time on the go, mini Ice Age conversations. And please remember to visit our sponsor, Patriot Supply. Every purchase helps keep this information flowing. MyPatriotSupply.com. Prepare with ADAPT 2030 and the rundown on social media where you can get these same information snippets in 1 minute or under.